The first co-conspirator, Ann Abrego, agreed to work together to transport undocumented aliens for profit and private financial gain.
But that's so weird. I thought he was like a father. He was here to get a better life working for a union, steelworker.
Now, the evidence will show that CC6 was also associated with Mexican drug cartels, which were used to further the alien smuggling conspiracy. That's why Van Hollen went down there. Raskin, what do you think that hearing was that he had when a judge found that he was removable? That was process. He had a whole appeal process. He lost. Kilmar, wife beater Abrego, back in the United States. This is going to be very exciting for Senator Chris Van Hollen. He's going to have to go and find a new place to have margaritas tonight now that he's here stateside. But now we're going to go through the reason why Kilmar is back, and it is a juicy one. We've now got an arrest warrant, we've got an indictment, and we've got a motion that the government submitted to hold this guy in detention so that he cannot be out on the streets trafficking illegal aliens through our country again. You see here the arrest warrant authorized from the Middle District of Tennessee to Kilmar, wife beater Abrego-Garcia, saying, all right, Kilmar, you are commanded to this officer to arrest Kilmar and bring him back here because he has now a valid indictment. Go get him. This is the cover sheet for the indictment. They said the clerk is asking for a warrant. We got 2 charges here. Count 1, conspiracy to unlawfully transport illegal aliens for financial gain. Maximum prison, 10 years, which is a good start. $250,000 fine. And U.S. Code, another violation, count 2, unlawful transportation of illegal aliens for financial gain. All of that signed. Interesting, they said, yeah, he is in custody, but not in our custody. Complaint has filed. Was the defendant arrested on the complaint? Yes. Search warrant issued. Got him. And they say estimated trial time, 7 days. Probably be longer than that. But all right, so that is the cover sheet. Now, here is the indictment. Kilmar Armando Abrego, wife beater Garcia, now indicted federally. Middle District of Tennessee, explaining that here is just the introductory allegations. From in or around 2016 through in or around 2025, so we got a big window there, Kilmar Armando Abrego and others known to the grand jury conspired to bring undocumented aliens to the United States from countries such as Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Ecuador, and elsewhere, ultimately passing through Mexico before coming into Texas and into America. The co-conspirators knew the undocumented aliens did not possess authorization to enter the United States, but they didn't care because it was a free-for-all. Now, Kilmar and the co-conspirators from El Salvador, Guatemala, Mexico, and elsewhere, they communicated with each other using cellular telephones and social media applications to facilitate the transportation of the illegals without authorization throughout the United States. Now, Kilmar and co-conspirators, they also collected financial payments. They got paid for this from undocumented aliens for acting as coyotes, right? Illegally transporting them through the United States. Now, the co-conspirators then knowingly transferred money between one another in an effort to conceal the origin of the payments. Now, the people, CC1, CC2, co-conspirator 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, are all persons known to the grand jury. They were co-conspirators with Abrego. They were all citizens of El Salvador. None of them were citizens of the United States. And co-conspirator 6 is also a person known to the grand jury, is a citizen of Guatemala and not a citizen of the United States. So 6 illegals plus Kilmar. Now, Kilmar Armando was a citizen of El Salvador, not a U.S. citizen, was living in the United States, also a member and associate of the transnational criminal organization La Mara Salvatrucha, otherwise known as MS-13. Now, MS-13 was a criminal enterprise engaged in other things, the unaliving of people, extortion, trafficking, alien trafficking, gun trafficking, alien smuggling, money laundering. They operated everywhere throughout the North and Central America, including El Salvador, Guatemala, Mexico, many places, including Texas, Maryland, New York, Tennessee, and elsewhere. Now, as detailed further below, Kilmar used his status in MS-13 to further his criminal activity. Over the course of the conspiracy, the conspirators knowingly and unlawfully transported thousands of undocumented aliens. Oh man, Senator Van Hollen must be just excited as hell. Those are a bunch of new voters for him. Thousands of undocumented aliens who had no authorization to be present in the United States, many of whom were gang members and associates. Now, the co-conspirators also work with transnational criminal organizations in Mexico to transport the undocumented aliens through Mexico and into the United States. And Joe Biden's FBI, when Tennessee Highway Patrol called, said, let him go. Who cares? We paid good money for him to be doing all of this. And, we give him Uber illegal alien airplane rides into the United States. So what if they're going to be trafficking them in a giant people mover? Now, count 1 for Kilmar. Conspiracy. Between in or around 2016 and 2025, in the Middle District of Tennessee and elsewhere, Kilmar did combine, conspire, confederate, and agree with 6 different people, co-conspirators co-conspirators 1 through 6 and others known and unknown to the grand jury to knowingly and in reckless disregard of the fact that certain aliens had entered into the United States illegally, move them in violation of the law. Now, here's the manner and the means. They transported, all working together. In 2006, shortly after meeting each other, the first co-conspirator, Abrego, agreed to work together to transport undocumented aliens for profit and private financial gain.
What? That's so weird. I thought he was like a father. He was here to get a better life working for a union steelworker.
Co-conspirators outside the United States facilitated the travel of undocumented aliens from El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Ecuador, Mexico, and elsewhere to illegally cross the United States into Texas without inspection. In fact, co-conspirator 6 was one of the primary sources of supply of undocumented aliens for the conspiracy, and many of the undocumented aliens included MS-13 members and associates. Of course, it's like who they know. It's their gang. They're probably under Papusa attack too. Man, our Papusa just got wiped out by Barrio gang. Oh, homie, me too. Kilmar Armando and CC1 ordinarily picked up the undocumented aliens in Houston, Texas. Shortly after the aliens had unlawfully crossed the southern border, come in through Texas, then Abrego and co-conspirator 1 would pick them up from Texas and transport them all across the United States. Now, during the course of the conspiracy, in fact, co-conspirator 1 was incarcerated for alien smuggling and was deported. So during that period, conspirator 1 was gone. So CC2 then began acting at the direction of CC1. He's like, oh man, I got me. So you're taking over. CC2 began working with Kilmar to transport undocumented aliens for profit. So then after CC1 was released, then CC1 came right back into the country illegally, re-entered the United States, and started working again with Kilmar and CC2 and other co-conspirators to continue the giant trafficking. Now, in addition to transporting undocumented aliens, Kilmar, CC1, and CC2, they also transported firearms that were illegally purchased in Texas, and they were distributed for resale in Maryland. Now, in addition to transporting undocumented aliens and firearms, Kilmar occasionally and simultaneously transported undocumented aliens and narcotics purchased in Texas and distribution for resale. On some occasions, in fact, members and associates of MS-13, the gang in Maryland, accompanied Kilmar on his trips to transport undocumented aliens to other parts of the United States. Now, on various occasions throughout the conspiracy, among the undocumented aliens Abrego and his co-conspirators transported, many were MS-13 members and associates. They also regularly required aliens that they transported to pay Kilmar in cash in order to facilitate their rides. The MS-13 members and associates that were transported by conspirator 2 refused to pay CC2 for his transportation services, but the MS-13 members and associates Kilmar transported generally treated Kilmar with respect and also paid him for his services. Co-conspirators later transferred via Western Union and other means at least some of these monies derived from the unlawful transportation within the United States to other co-conspirators in foreign countries like Mexico, Guatemala as part of a wider alien smuggling operation using Western Union. If you look at those numbers, like billions of dollars of remittances go out regularly to these individuals, to foreign countries. Now, CC3 on multiple occasions, along with Kilmar and CC1, so 3 co-conspirators, transported undocumented aliens, and CC3 and CC1 must be just talking. CC3 also received and transferred payments from undocumented aliens derived from the unlawful transportation within the United States and in furtherance of the conspiracy, and co-conspirators 4 and 5, they also received and transferred thousands of dollars of criminal proceeds derived from the conspiracy by wire to and from other co-conspirators, both within and outside the United States. 1 and 6 and other co-conspirators, also and unknown to the grand jury, transferred money by wire for a fee to obscure the recipient of the money. Then they just transfer them around. Just following the bouncing ball, transferring the money around, probably with fake reasons. Papusa delivery. Oh, Papusa bakery. Papusa needs more flour for my Papusa meat. Yeah. In efforts to do this, in part to protect operational security and to conceal their illegal alien smuggling operation, which is, by the way, the Papusa thing literally was their story for this dude. He Papusas, man. Mom's Papusa business under attack. They've got 6 co-conspirators. We're all saying, no, we're not moving Papusa meat around. CC1 and 2 varied their transportation routes within the United States, and they routinely took undocumented alien cell phones that they transported. They provided them back at the end of the trip. They did this to ensure the aliens could not and would not contact anyone else during the trip. So then they transported Kilmar and 2 other people, transported undocumented aliens in an unsafe manner. They used reconfigured vehicles with aftermarket unattached seating rows. Remember, we saw that in the video. And they transported children on the floorboards of vehicles in order to maximize profits. Now, as part of the conspiracy, none of the undocumented aliens transported by Kilmar carried luggage. Well, they don't have anything. They're illegal. To conceal their illegal activity, CC1, Kilmar, and two, routinely devised and employed knowingly false cover stories like pupusa threats to provide to law enforcement if they were stopped for a transport and he's bumbling around, don't have driver's license, don't have insurance, can't speak English, and the cops just say, well, you're clearly trafficking humans. You've got a bunch of people stuffed back there in rows, and the FBI lets them go. You see if you get let go when you're driving on a suspended license without insurance. No, it's not going to happen. They're going to call the FBI and say, hey, Rob is trafficking people and drugs and speeding without a license and insurance. Everyone knows what it is, but you just let go. Ridiculous. So FBI was complicit in a lot of this, and they should be investigated too. Like, who picked up that phone call and made that decision, and why? These false cover stories regularly involve, construction. Yeah, no one will, disbelieve that. In 2021, as part of CC6's criminal activities in these international transports, CC6 was involved in the transport of more than 150 migrants. Exactly what I'm talking about. That ended when the tractor trailer carrying them overturned in Mexico, resulting in the deaths of more than 50 migrants and injuring many others. That's right. They treat people like cattle. Okay, if you lose 50 of them, so what? There's going to be 50 more. And there's a whole industry. And our government was paying billions of this to like the Lutherans and to the Catholics and all these NGOs. They're like, we're going to come in and resettle these people because we're good Christian people. Get out of here. What you're doing is facilitating human trafficking, and you're causing the death of people, and they're doing it in the names of humanity when they're not. They're trying to shift the entire country of the United States. They may well have succeeded, which is why we're trying to push this back. Now, Kilmar sometimes brought close relatives with him when he picked up the aliens in Texas and transported them to other parts of the United States. On other occasions, Kilmar went alone. During some of the trips, Kilmar operated when he did not bring a close relative, and CC6 received reports from other aliens that Kilmar had abused some of the female undocumented aliens. Oh, Papusa boy. Not supposed to be doing that. Abusing female undocumented aliens, man. Maybe they'll be new victims for new criminal charges. What kind of abuse was that? Now, knowing this was bad for business, he reported these allegations of abuse to CC1 and CC2, and they told Kilmar, stop grabbing the women, you disgusting pervert, criminal alien, wife beater, saying, stop it, okay? You can't do that. It's bad for business. They're going to start talking about you being a perv. Now, Kilmar and CC1 and CC2 routinely transported between 6 to 10 illegals per trip. Now, over the course of the conspiracy, Kilmar transported undocumented aliens who had entered the United States without authorization on approximately more than 100 trips. 100 trips. FBI, just let him go. Yeah, no worries. So like 1,000 people this dude helped to bring into the country. Made tons of money off of it. The entire federal government apparently just let it go. And now he's facing some justice. Now here, transportation. On or about the following dates, as a representative of the manner and means of the conspiracy, Kilmar and his co-conspirators took or caused the following actions. Here's what happened. We saw this video. On or about November 30th, the state trooper with the Tennessee Highway Patrol conducted a traffic stop on a Chevrolet Suburban on Interstate I-40 in Tennessee, outside of Cookeville, now located in the middle of Tennessee. Now, other THP troopers subsequently responded to the scene of the traffic stop. Now, the November 30th traffic stop was captured on video. We watched that here previously. Now, Kilmar was the driver of the Suburban. There were 9 additional passengers in the Suburban, all of whom were Hispanic males, which is curious. I thought that one dude up there was definitely a chick. I'm like, that looks like a chick trying to look like a dude. Turns out it was a dude. Now, we do know there are some interesting things going on with MS-13 and some weird, gender things. I'm not sure what it is. Anyways, and none of whom had any identification, because why would they? They're illegal. Now, when asked where they were traveling from, Kilmar knowingly and falsely told the state trooper he and his passengers were coming from St. Louis. No, he further knowingly and falsely stated to the state trooper that the Suburban passengers had been in St. Louis for 2 weeks doing construction. Also offered that the passengers were on their way back to Maryland, when he also then knew that to be false because the passengers had also been picked up in Texas. So lying to cops. Now, multiple passengers told the THP state troopers they were all going to the same address in Maryland. Talked to some other people. The Suburban that Kilmar was driving had an aftermarket third row of seats placed where a cargo area should be, which was occupied by illegals. Now, none of the 9 illegals had any luggage, nor was there any tools or construction at all. No equipment, because they weren't doing construction. Now, the license plate reader data, which can track particular vehicle locations at any given point in time, show that the Chevrolet was driving and had not been near St. Louis in the past 12 months. Not even close. In fact, had been to Houston within the last week leading up to the traffic stop. Now, Kilmar, in his pocket, he had about $1,400 in cash. Shortly after the traffic stop, Kilmar informed other members of the conspiracy that he had been stopped by law enforcement in Tennessee, but that he had been released, all in violation violation of the law. Now, here's count 2. Unlawful transportation of undocumented aliens, saying on or about November 30th, Kilmar aided and abetted by others known to the grand jury to illegally transport and move aliens in the United States. And so, based on all of this, we think that if he is convicted, there should be forfeiture of the things that he was in. So I guess they want the vehicle. The proceeds, right? Forfeiture of any of his assets or proceeds that came from this, signed off by Robert E. McGuire, acting U.S. attorney with Jacob Warren, charging Kilmar with 2 crimes against America. Now, in addition to that, we also saw that in the Middle District of Tennessee, the government also is asking to hold him in custody. So he's just been charged, but here's why we cannot let him out from the DOJ. They sent this one in. They said the United States of America is now asking and respectfully filing this memo to support pre-trial detention of Kilmar. Do not let him out. Now, at the defendant's initial appearance, the United States is going to ask that we hold him in custody because he is a serious danger to the United States and a serious risk of flight. And no conditions or combination of conditions can enhance the safety of our community. They write, all right, Judge, in Nashville, Tennessee. This is not Zenas. Now, over the past 9 years, Kilmar has played a significant role in an undocumented alien smuggling ring that has resulted in thousands of undocumented aliens being illegally transported into and throughout the United States, including members and associates of La Mara Salvatrucha and a recently designated FTO foreign terrorist organization and unaccompanied minor children, thanks to Kilmar. Now, on May 21st, a grand jury in this district returned a sealed indictment, charged him alien smuggling and conspiracy. If convicted, he faces a maximum punishment of 10 years in prison for each alien he transported, okay? Stack them up. So let's say he had 8 per car, did 100 trips, 800 people, times 10, is that 8,000 years? All right. Accordingly, the sentencing exposure for the defendant, given the number of undocumented aliens, goes well beyond the remainder of his life. So we can't let him out. The grand jury alleges, among other troubling facts, that Kilmar smuggled thousands of undocumented aliens throughout the United States, is a member and an associate of MS-13, FTO, transported numerous gang members into and throughout the United States, used his status as MS-13 to further the alien smuggling, transported children, Senator Van Hollen, Jamie Raskin, Eric Swalwell, throughout the United States to maximize profit. That's child trafficking, dude. Abused undocumented alien females. Now, I don't know what that means exactly. Like that's like a digital R or whatever that is. Under his control, he trafficked firearms and narcotics from Texas to Maryland on multiple occasions. Maryland man, Democrat hero. The evidence that the defendant committed these offenses is overwhelming. Additional evidence the government has uncovered as part of its investigation, discussed further below, regarding the defendant's past violence and attempted solicitation of PDF files. This dude was the Democrat hero. He is. They all, lapped this up. They said Trump was a monster. There's no evidence this guy was bad at all. There's no evidence he's MS-13. He never had his day in court. No process at all, even though he did. David Jones on 10/10/2019 wrote a whole order about everything that they analyzed in his withholding of removal order. And that was plenty of process. And that withholding of removal order was for Guatemala, not El Salvador. This dude has to be detained in pretrial detention. And if you're going to release him, send him to Van Hollen's house. But that's it. And just kidding. So don't let him out, even for Van Hollen. He's too dangerous for Van Hollen. In summary, the whole bent of his adult life demonstrates a complete disregard for the law and establishes that he is a significant threat to the community because no condition or combination of conditions will reasonably assure the safety of our community here. We've got to keep him in pretrial detention. More background. The facts explain. On Wednesday, November 30th, Kilmar was stopped for speeding. The body cam captured the interactions of the defendant during the traffic stop. He drove a Chevrolet Suburban that had been altered with aftermarket third row seats. He had 9 Hispanic males packed into the SUV. Perfect. 90 years, Kilmar. There's your process. Just stack that one up there for you. The defendant told the Tennessee Highway Patrol that he and his passengers had been in St. Louis for the preceding 2 weeks doing construction work. Now, during the course of its investigation, the government learned that Kilmar's conduct at the traffic stop was linked to a complex conspiracy of illegally trafficked undocumented aliens into and throughout the United States. And the question is, why was Chris Wray's FBI allowing that to happen? And why did Senator Van Hollen freak out about that and go down to El Salvador to talk to him about that and to talk to whoever was on the other end of that operation? Kilmar was just a little pawn on all this who happened to get caught. But who let him go and who sent Van Hollen down there? There's a lot more to that. Now, the SUV the defendant was driving on November November 30th, was owned by a co-conspirator and someone who was a convicted alien smuggler. FBI should have known that, obviously. Cell phone location information for the cell phone used by the defendant, as well as the license plate reader, showed the defendant lied to the THB when he told him he'd been working a construction job. They said, no, we got your license plate scanned over there. They got all these, scanners everywhere now, so they just know where the cars are. No, you weren't. You just pinged you yesterday. So you were down there. So you're a liar. And the FBI knew all of that. They still said, you're good. Let him go. Leave him alone. Specifically, the defendant had been in Texas earlier that same morning, was not even close to St. Louis within 2 prior weeks. And moreover, none of the individuals in the vehicle had luggage or even tools consistent with construction work. The government also learned after obtaining Kilmar's cell phone records that the exact minute on the body-worn camera footage that Kilmar told the cops that the defendant was going to call his boss, Kilmar placed a call on his cell phone to the owner of the SUV and one of his fellow co-conspirators, a previously convicted alien smuggler. He calls the chief smuggler, like, I got stopped by the cops here. What do I do? As part of the investigation, the government interviewed a number of Kilmar's co-conspirators, as well as a number of other witnesses who personally knew Kilmar. Those co-conspirators and witnesses will establish at trial that the November 30th traffic stop was not a one-off transaction for this dude. Rather, the evidence will show that Kilmar's actions in November 22 were part of a larger and sustained pattern of alien smuggling. Specifically, he had been in the alien smuggling business for years. Since at least 2016, it was his primary source of income. Oh, I thought he was a steel worker with the union. Testimony at trial will establish that he transported approximately 50 undocumented aliens throughout the United States per month for several years. Okay, so 500 years a month of penalties for him. Perfect. The evidence will also establish that his long-standing membership and association with MS-13 and how he used his association with the gang to further the smuggling conspiracy. He's a tough guy. Now, the alien smuggling conspiracy transported gang members from Central America through Mexico into and throughout the United States. And so, with all of that, we got to keep this dude in custody. The Bail Reform Act sets the rules for this. Under the BRA, if the United States moves to detain a defendant hearing shall be held if the case involves a charged offense falling in one of 5 categories, or if a detention hearing should be had if the defendant poses a serious risk of flight, of attempting to obstruct justice, or to intimidate someone else. The required detention hearing shall be held immediately upon the person's first appearance before the judicial officer, unless that person or the attorney seeks a continuance. Now, the rules provide 4 factors that the court should consider when you're determining whether or not Kilmar is going to be a flight risk or danger to the community. Number 1, the nature and circumstances of the offense charged, the weight of the evidence against the defendant's history and characteristics, and 4, the nature and seriousness of the danger to the community posed if we release this guy. Now, a judge shall order the detention before trial if after the hearing and upon consideration of all the available information, if the judicial officer finds that no condition or combination of conditions will reasonably assure the appearance of the person as required and the safety of the community. Now, a judicial officer's finding of dangerousness must be supported by clear and convincing evidence. So it's a little higher than preponderance of the evidence, which is like 51% more likely than not, but it's lower than beyond a reasonable doubt, right? It's clear and convincing evidence, a little higher than that, but lower than beyond a reasonable doubt. When the risk of flight is the basis for the detention, however, the government must only satisfy a preponderance of the evidence standard, okay? So dangerousness is a higher standard, but flight risk is very low. It's like more likely than not, you're not going to come here. Now, as the factual summary demonstrates, the offenses charged in this case are severe. Section 3142 says to the court, you got to consider the nature and the circumstances of the offense, including whether the offense falls within one of the enumerated categories that Congress said is especially serious: a crime of violence, terrorism, if it involves a minor victim, or a controlled substance, or a firearm, or any other destructive devices. These are the most serious crimes. Now, alien smuggling is an incredibly dangerous enterprise. It imposes grave risks to the aliens being smuggled to the general public. And one of the most prolific suppliers of undocumented aliens for the conspiracy was CC6, co-conspirator 6, who was located in Central America, right? Who was that dude? Was that the dude that Van Hollen was going to go meet with? He's like, hey, your boy got popped, but I got him. CC6 coordinated the delivery of at least 50 undocumented aliens per month. Kilmar picked up the aliens in Texas, transported them to Maryland through Tennessee and other states after they were smuggled in. Kilmar made at least 1 trip per week over the course of several years, like 50 at a month is what they said. 1 trip per week, maybe 8 to 10 per trip. As detailed in the indictment, which we just read, co-conspirator 6 was responsible, along with other co-conspirators, for the death of more than 50 migrants when a tractor trailer overturned because they were stuffed in there like sardines. Now, the evidence will show that CC6 was also associated with Mexican drug cartels, which were used to further the alien smuggling conspiracy. That's why Van Hollen went went down there. Not to go hang out with Kilmar, because it was part of a much broader thing happening. The grand jury also alleged that many of the undocumented aliens transported by Kilmar and his co-conspirators were MS-13 gang members. The MS-13 status was particularly important when transporting MS-13 gang members. They had a large presence in Maryland, apparently they're fine with that there, where the defendant Kilmar resided, and as many as 30% of the undocumented aliens were gang members. So they're just inviting them in. The defendant also transported minors in an unsafe way, not restrained in car seats, but on the floorboard, recklessly and selfishly designed to maximize the number of undocumented aliens being transported and increase the profits. These representative acts demonstrate the danger of alien smuggling to both the aliens and to the general public. But they say, you're a bigot if you say that we shouldn't be allowing this to happen to these people. For all these reasons, the nature and circumstances warrant detention. Now let's talk about the weight of the evidence as well. Explaining. The weight of the evidence against Kilmar is overwhelming. The November 30th traffic stop was captured on body cam footage. The defendant is readily identifiable. The government, as part of its proffer of evidence to the court, will provide a copy of the footage if you'd like to look at it. Put simply, it's not going to be credible for the defendant to argue to a jury that there's someone else in the body cam. It's him. Moreover, Kilmar's statements to THP, also clearly captured on the camera, that he was in St. Louis is a demonstrable and unequivocal lie. So his credibility will just be destroyed. And it was designed to conceal his criminal activity. And it's proven by the license plate reader and the records of the SUV and his own cell phone. He was never where he said he was, so he lied to the cops. We're going to explain that, show it, and just show everybody. Not to mention the fact that the SUV he was driving belonged to a convicted alien smuggler who's already convicted for that same crime, who he referred to as his boss on the camera footage. The same boss that he then called during the traffic stop based on his own cell phone records. Now, at trial, co-conspirators and witnesses, and they got like 6 co-conspirators now, will corroborate what the jurors will plainly see on the footage. That Kilmar had been smuggling aliens for years, earning well over $1,000 for every trip. The evidence will also show that the co-conspirators had no other source of employment. The only thing they did was smuggle aliens, and that Kilmar was one of the most prolific smugglers in the conspiracy. Just an innocent Maryland man who was a union member, dues-paying union member. History and characteristics of this dude. All right, Kilmar's 29 years old, and apparently he has spent his entire adult life committing crime. In addition to nearly a decade of alien smuggling, he's a member and associate of MS-13, a foreign terrorist organization. They have terrorized those inside and outside the United States for decades, committing horrific acts of violence. They're a criminal enterprise engaged in all sorts of bad stuff, and they're everywhere. On March 28th, Kilmar was arrested in Maryland with other MS-13 gang members. Finally, based on where Kilmar was, who he was with, other known members of MS-13, his clothing, and the fact he appeared to be selling marijuana, led those involved in the arrest to determine that he was a member of MS-13. Now, in substance, unless Kilmar had status in the gang, the defendant would not have allowed the defendant to represent MS-13 in their presence with his clothing and hat representing the gang and selling drugs without severe consequences. Now, in the government's investigation, the status in MS-13 was also corroborated by multiple witnesses, co-conspirators who also personally knew the defendant. In other words, if he was standing around with gang members and he was wearing gang member signs and he wasn't other gang members who were actual gang members, wouldn't have allowed that to happen. And he was standing there without any problems. Also corroborated by others, he's one of them. One of the most troubling facts the government learned in its investigation was how Kilmar got into MS-13. According to a co-conspirator, Kilmar stated that he participated in the unaliving of a rival gang member's mother in El Salvador. This dude took out the moms too, somebody else's mother, specifically the mother of an 18th Street gang member. So it sounds like his little papusa story, he said, my mom is getting attacked by the papusas attackers. Turns out he was the one attacking their mamas. Later, as part of his immigration proceedings in the US, he claimed, I can't return to El Salvador. I'm in fear of retribution from the 18th Street gang. Why? Oh, because you eliminated one of their moms. While partially true, he, according to the information received by the government, was in fear of retaliation by the 18th Street gang because of his own actions in participating in the unaliving of a gang member's mother. Dude took out the mom and then said that they were trying to take out his mom, and that's a basis for why we should let this murderer into our country. Now, Kilmar's treatment of undocumented aliens is also very troubling. Although more worried about curtailing demand for their illegal business, and other conspirators were so concerned about his abuse of the females that they confronted him on multiple occasions and said, stop it. Finally, Kilmar's conduct towards his own family members demonstrates he's violent as hell in his personal life. In August 2022, his wife filed a petition petition for a protective order. Now, the wife, in her own words, detailed a string of alleged abuses that Kilmar inflicted on her and their own children. She called them her kids, my kids. We've read it. They're my kids. He came in, wouldn't feed my kids, got my kids screaming, my kids. In August 3, 2020, the wife reported, among other troubling allegations, that he locked his kids in their room, grabbed her and slapped her and broke her phone. She went to the courts. She couldn't go to the cops because the cops would come and arrest him and charge him, and she didn't want that to happen. So she didn't know what to do. She went on to write that the abuse on August 3rd was part of a pattern for Kilmar, that he had broken her phones before, broke TVs, even her son's tablet. The petition documented 4 other instances of abuse within the past year of being filed, all troubling and violent. She reported that she had documented bruises on her body left by Kilmar, and that she and her kids were scared of the defendant, right? So that on that one, my kids. The defendant also claimed that he could unalive his wife with impunity. He says, what are they going to do? They don't even know I'm here. I'm a ghost. Court filings in the county revealed even more abuse the next year, during 2021. In fact, in May 2021, the district court in the county found reasonable grounds to believe that Kilmar punched and scratched his wife, ripped off her shirt, grabbed and bruised her. Another finding by a judge. Maniac. Taken in totality, the history and the characteristics of Kilmar reveal the life of a violent man. No control of his temper, no regard for the rule of law, and no basis for the court to have any confidence that the community, including his own family, is going to be safe if he were released. And finally, the government's investigation has revealed that Kilmar has a long history and association with MS-13, a violent criminal organization committed to terror with thousands of members throughout the U.S. and Central America. As detailed above, they do all sorts of stuff. Alien smuggling, drugs, firearms. Although Kilmar had multiple encounters with law enforcement in his past, instead of reforming his ways, he chose to continue his criminal activity. Time and again, week after week, he chose to continue his integral role in smuggling aliens for 9 years, all to earn a profit. The government learned in its investigation that Kilmar, on many occasions over the course of several years, tried to recruit others to engage in smuggling with him, promising lucrative payments for riding to Texas to help me pick these people up. Now, in addition to the myriad of illegal conduct spanning a decade outlined in this indictment, the government also learned, that Kilmar solicited nudies of minors beginning in 2020. The government's investigation into the solicitation of CP is ongoing, and no charges about CP have been filed, but it demonstrates the danger that he poses to the community, not just respect to alien smuggling. So why have they not charged that? 2020? Yeah, we'll see. Maybe they will. In summary, with respect to the dangerousness to the community, he has spent his entire adult life engaging in criminal activity. He has shown complete disrespect for the rule of law the very moment he entered our country. The totality of the factors show he is a danger to our community, and he should therefore be detained. Now, his only ties to the Middle District of Tennessee, here where this case is, are directly related to his criminal activity. He chose to smuggle illegals through Tennessee nearly every week during the entire course of this conspiracy. Kilmar and his co-conspirators chose to travel through Tennessee for a number of reasons. It was the most direct, but they also felt that traveling through Tennessee gave them less scrutiny from law enforcement. He repeatedly availed himself to the highways in this district, and he has no other ties to the area. He's never resided in or been employed in Tennessee. He's got no connection to the region outside of this, so you got to keep him here. Additionally, the penalties that he faces, including a lengthy prison sentence, give him a powerful motive to flee, and his position within the conspiracy provides the ready means for them to just fueta him out of here. The facts of this case demonstrate that Kilmar was an instrumental part of a large and complex, undocumented alien smuggling conspiracy that went all the way down to the gangs in Central America. The defendant and his co-conspirators successfully smuggled thousands into the United States, and they've got a large network of resources that has been avoiding detention and apprehension for years. And why? They were stopped. Tennessee caught them. The FBI let him go. And then Van Hollen flew down there to go meet with Kilmar and the gangbangers. So in conclusion, the Trump DOJ says, in light of all these factors, the government submits Kilmar poses a significant danger to the community. He's a flight risk. No condition or combination of conditions will reasonably assure the safety of the community or the presence of Kilmar in court. And so accordingly, we say that pretrial detention should be granted. Coming in from the DOJ to hold him in custody. Axios, still calling this dude a Maryland man, right? So Axios reported this, says wrongly deported Maryland man Kilmar Abrego-Garcia is on his way back to the United States. It's like, you guys are coping so hard. Like, give us the full headline. First of all, he wasn't wrongfully deported. You just have to read the order. Nobody's read it, but if you read it, it clearly says Guatemala. So his deportation was totally valid. And even if you say that I'm wrong and that the withholding of removal says El Salvador, which it it doesn't. You can just read it yourself. Then Trump still has the final ace up the sleeve, which is the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act, which says if you've already been adjudicated as removable and you're an alien enemy because you're a gangbanger, then you're no longer subject to withholding of removal protections. Okay, so the Trump DOJ should have won on that on both accounts, but they had a liar, cheater attorney, in my opinion, who was handling the case, and he got fired for doing it erroneously. I call it a poison pill. And Stephen Miller is also responding to a lot of this. Caroline Leavitt came out and torched Van Hollen. Van Hollen came out with this dumb statement. He says, after months of ignoring our Constitution, which never happened, it seems the Trump administration has relented to our demands for compliance with the court orders. Bro, they're charging him with felonies in Tennessee and due process for Kilmar. He's going to get due process now. He's going to get criminal due process, like for 100%, and sit in federal custody, hopefully for the rest of his life. This has never been about the man. Yes. Oh, see how that is? See how that's going? Yeah, it has. It's been about his constitutional rights and the rights of all. Here's my full statement, which is no different than what he posted. So Van Hollen gets wrecked by Stephen Miller. He says, what a fool. There is no more process for deporting a criminal alien with a final removal order, no matter how much he's admired by Democrats. He got his process. He's here because new evidence has resulted in a massive criminal indictment. He will be tried, he will be jailed, and then he will be deported again to El Salvador. So just get ready for it. Now, Bill Melugin also shared that Caroline Leavitt is torching Van Hollen. Caroline Leavitt shared this statement, said, the Justice Department's grand jury indictment against Abrego proves the unhinged Democrat Party was wrong, and their stenographers in the fake news media were once again played like fools. Abrego-Garcia was never an innocent Maryland man. Garcia is an illegal alien terrorist gang member and human trafficker who has spent his entire life abusing innocent people, especially women and the most vulnerable. Abrego will now return to the United States to answer for his crimes and to meet the full force of American justice. The Democrat lawmakers, namely Van Hollen and every single so-called journalist who defended this illegal criminal abuser, must immediately apologize to all of Garcia's victims. The Trump administration will continue to hold criminals accountable to the fullest extent of the law. Very nice statement from the press secretary. Kristi Noem, Homeland, said, for the past 2 months, the media and the Democrats have burnt to the ground any last shred of credibility they had by glorifying Kilmar Garcia, a known gang member, human trafficker, and serial domestic abuser. Today, the United States of America confronts Abrego with overwhelming evidence. He's being indicted by a grand jury for human smuggling, including children, and conspiracy. Justice awaits this Salvadoran man. And we also saw Nayib Bukele was commenting on this, the president of El Salvador, writing, as I said in the Oval Office, I would never smuggle a terrorist into the United States. Thank you. And 2, I would never release a gang member onto the streets of El Salvador. That said, we work with the Trump administration, and if they request the return of a gang member to face criminal charges, of course we wouldn't refuse. No more margaritas under custody, says Nayib Bukele in a little last-minute zinger. And Raskin was out here today, and our friend Western Lensman is saying he's now in cover-up mode. Raskin is backtracking, saying, well, we never actually defended him as a person. We care about the Constitution and the constitutional rights and everything. You guys called him Maryland man. You said he was like a United States citizen. You got a bunch of people to believe that he was a resident of our country and that he was just a regular old union worker. That was the whole scam. Now they're having to walk that back because this dude is a PDF file.
Though he, of course, is alleged to have committed these crimes. Do you think that Democrats risk politically playing into the president's hands by focusing on this case?
First of all, I don't know of a single Democrat who defended him specifically against any crimes because he wasn't charged with any crimes. He doesn't have any criminal history, to my knowledge, or a criminal record, and there were no charges outstanding when he got unceremoniously picked up and flown out.
So there don't have to be charges before you remove somebody if they're in the country illegally. In fact, if you charge them, then you have to give them all the due process. If you don't charge them, you just say you're here illegally and you just enforce the law, then you remove them out, and they're trying to conflate the two, right? So in order to remove anybody, you have to charge them with something. No. They're here legally. Doesn't need to be any new findings in order to remove them.
Of the country. I mean, that's called a disappearance. That's what happens in authoritarian societies. They obviously,
like when the FBI raided the J6ers,
they want to make this about whether or not he ends up being a good guy or a bad guy, but it's not a moral question. It's a legal question. It's a constitutional question of whether the government can pick people up and take them out of the country. And I think the Supreme Court has been fairly emphatic about this. Due process is for everybody. Sometimes I hear my MAGA colleagues say, you're for due process for guilty people? Well, yeah, because we don't know if they're guilty or they're innocent until we've had due process. That's the whole point of due process.
Oh, gosh. All right. So there is a process, and there is certain process that is due for certain things. Some things have more due process. Some things have less due process. But the aliens got it. Raskin Raskin, what do you think that hearing was that he had when a judge found that he was removable? That was process. He had a whole appeal process. He lost. He had the withholding of removal with David Jones. That was process. He had multiple opportunities to have his process. They want them to have due process plus. They want them to be able to be here illegally, get extra privileges like driving around without licenses, working for years, breaking the law, getting protection by the FBI, and more. And it's not going to happen anymore. So the Democrats hopefully will pay some political consequences for their endorsement of illegal aliens and their never-ending protection of them. But we've also got Pam Bondi, who came out today. And so Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche come out and they give us this announcement in this short presser today.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Pam.
We're here today to announce a major update in an important case. Abrego-Garcia has landed in the United States to face justice. On May 21st, a grand jury in the Middle District of Tennessee returned a sealed indictment charging Abrego-Garcia with alien smuggling and conspiracy to commit alien smuggling in violation of Title 8 U.S.C. 1324. We want to thank President Bukele for agreeing to return Abrego-Garcia to the United States. Our government presented El Salvador with an arrest warrant, and they agreed to return him to our country. We're grateful to President Bukele for agreeing to return him to our country to face these very serious charges. This is what American justice looks like. Upon completion of his sentence, we anticipate he will be returned to his home country of El Salvador. The grand jury found that over the past 9 years, Abrego-Garcia has played a significant role in an alien smuggling ring. They found this was his full-time job, not a contractor. He was a smuggler of humans and children and women. He made over 100 trips, the grand jury found, smuggling people throughout our country. MS-13 members, violent gang, terrorist organization members throughout our country. Thousands of illegal aliens were smuggled. This is especially disturbing because Abrego-Garcia is also alleged with transporting minor children. The defendant traded the innocence of minor children for profit. There are even more disturbing facts that the grand jury uncovered. It is alleged this defendant is part of the same smuggling ring responsible for the death of more than 50 migrants in 2021 after the tractor trailer overturned in Mexico. This is part of that same ring. The defendant abused undocumented alien females, according to co-conspirators who were under his control while transporting them throughout our country. This defendant trafficked firearms and narcotics throughout our country on multiple occasions. They were using vehicles, SUVs, with added seats in the back, floors that had been ripped out.
Just shove the kids
guns,
down there.
Narcotics, children, women, MS-13 members. That is what the grand jury found. A co-conspirator alleged that the defendant solicited nude photographs and videos of a minor. A co-conspirator also alleges the defendant played a role in the murder of a rival gang member's mother. These facts demonstrate Abrego-Garcia is a danger to our community. We want to thank the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, our state and local partners, our acting U.S. Attorney Robert McGuire, and prosecutors from the Joint Task Force Vulcan. Questions?
The traffic stop that we've seen video of from Tennessee where Abrego-Garcia was first identified by the local authorities. At the time, the Homeland Security Department declined to take custody of him. What has happened in between that time and in between the time that the government has been arguing that he was not returnable from El Salvador? What has happened since in this investigation that brought you here?
Yes, the question was in 2021, there was the traffic stop. And what has changed since then? What has changed is Donald Trump is now president of the United States and our borders are again secure. And thanks to the bright light that has been shined on Abrego-Garcia, this investigation continued with actually amazing police work. And we were able to track this case and stop this international smuggling ring from continuing.
Recently found facts, right?
Yes,
okay.
Recently found facts.
Investigation in Tennessee. Can you say when that investigation was opened?
Well, the grand jury indicted on May 21st. This investigation has been ongoing.
Maybe I misunderstood you, but you were mentioning, that he had some involvement in a murder, or was connected to groups that had, involved with this other smuggling ring. But to be clear, the only charges he's facing right now are the, human smuggling charges. That's the one offense. But the other things that you have talked about are not actually in the indictment?
No, co-conspirators allege that, and we were clear to say that. He is charged with, it's not only very serious charges of alien smuggling. And again, there were children involved in that. You know, human trafficking, not only in our country, but in our world, is very, very real. It's very dangerous. And as you saw recently in Virginia, the arrest
FBI,
we
though.
made of the MS-13 member, unrelated to this, we learned at that press conference, that's where they bring young children into our country and they start grooming them at middle school age to become MS-13 full-fledged members, commit violent crimes throughout our country. It is highly organized. It is very dangerous. And they are living throughout our country, but no more, because they are being arrested, they are being prosecuted and being convicted and deported when appropriate. That's all for today. Thank you.
Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche, Kilmar getting arrested and indicted. And as it stands here, 10 years per alien. And we think there might be about 1,000 aliens. So he's looking at a long time. So we'll, of course, keep our eye on this one. We'll see what the Democrats have to say about this in response. We think that there will be some nice distance put between them, but that should not be allowed to happen. They want to defend Maryland Man. They want to make him part of their entire political platform. Well, then they can go ahead and do that, and we'll stand for actual Americans here. So we'll cover this case. Thank you for subscribing and joining us as we do.